questions on the statement. Now moving straight on to portfolio questions on culture, tourism and external affairs. Can I remind members that questions 5, 6 and 8 are grouped together. Question 1, Pauline McNeill, please.
Government, how it will grow the live music industry in Scotland given the closure of the O2 ABC.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
Despite the closure of the O2 ABC, Glasgow and Scotland have continued to have a strong and diverse live music scene. Live music events in Scotland were attended by 1.1 million tourists in 2018, a 38% increase from 2017. We recognise there are challenges, but we are committed to working with our partners to grow the sector. Creative Scotland is working with stakeholders to identify skills and audience and talent development projects that would help to increase knowledge and capitalise on resources. Audiences and talent development were a particular focus in its targeted funding of the 2020 Independent Venue Week.
Pauline McNeill.
A new report highlights that the industry generated £431 million last year of spending throughout Scotland through tickets, accommodation, the usual merchandising associated with the live music industry. In fact, there were 4,300 full-time jobs sustained. However, the report also warned that there's an urgent need for more investment in order to keep Scotland's market growing. On checking the Creative Scotland website yesterday, I can't even see a mention of the contemporary music industry or the live music sector at all, and considering they have not published a review of the industry since 2013, how can we trust that this agency really cares at all about live music? So I ask the Cabinet Secretary, will she look at this and will the Cabinet Secretary do to maintain Scotland's position as a world leader?
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm more than happy to make sure that Creative Scotland provides the information that the member seeks. But I've just referred to the Independent Venue Week, an important part of helping venues develop. And in terms of Creative Scotland funding ring-fenced for Scottish venues, that has allowed for an expansion of particular venues across Edinburgh and Glasgow, extending to Bathgate, in my constituency, Falkirk, Aberdeen, Dundee, Galashiels, Inverness. Also, Creative Scotland advised me that on almost a weekly basis, they fund acts in all music genres to record albums and tour them. And they've funded venues and organisations as widespread as Anne Lanterre, Aberdeen Performing Arts, Shetland Arts Development Agency, Platform, CCA, Horsecross, Queen's Hall and others, so ensuring that live music remains vibrant. But obviously she wants particular information about contemporary music, and from within what I've just described, I'll make sure the information of contemporary music is passed to the member.
Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to see that the increase is 38%, as Glasgow certainly has a fantastic live music industry. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, the COPS event is coming to Glasgow obviously in November, and exactly what advertising will be produced to encourage delegates who are coming to that event to take part and enjoy the live music events in Glasgow?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm not familiar with the immediate programming around COP26 in terms of live music acts or performances. I do know that both Glasgow City Council and ourselves in the Scottish Government are very keen to make sure that we can showcase Scotland to best effect, and also, importantly, show how culture can actually influence behaviour and obviously challenge thinking in relation to some of the big ideas that will be around in COP26. We'll work cooperatively with the UK Government on the wider issues, and particularly on the hosting aspects. But importantly, it's a great opportunity to showcase Glasgow, UNESCO City of Music.
Question 2, Emma Harper.
Presiding Officer, I know I have to leave after my question, so thank you for agreeing for me to leave right after my question. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to boost tourist numbers across Dumfries and Galloway, and how South of Scotland Enterprise will assist with this.
Cabinet Secretary Fergus Hugh.
We've provided Visit Scotland with £1 million to market the region, which has created the See South Scotland campaign. This is in addition to the £1.5 million that we're investing in forest tourism infrastructure and the £85 million we have committed towards the Borderlands Growth Deal. Through the South of Scotland Economic Partnership, 13 tourism projects have also received funding. The new South of Scotland Enterprise will be operational from 1st April this year and will drive inclusive growth across the region, taking a fresh approach to economic development and boosting growth in key sectors, including tourism.
Emma Harper.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Last week I met with representatives from Visit South West Scotland who raised concerns over the current approach to accessing funding from the new South Scotland Enterprise Agency, as any and all applications must be to the benefit of the whole of the South of Scotland. Local businesses and constituents in D&G are concerned that this pan-South Scotland approach may be a barrier to access and support. Would the Cabinet Secretary therefore agree to meet with me to discuss this issue in further detail and to look at the current arrangements to see if a change can be made?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the South of Scotland Enterprise will work with businesses and communities across the south of Scotland to support activities that drive inclusive economic growth. I understand that the Chair-designate, Professor Russell Griggs, has recently met the Chair of Visit South West to discuss tourism in the south of Scotland. And as the funding criteria for the South of Scotland Enterprise will be an operational matter, I've asked that Nick Halfhide, the Interim Chief Executive, meets with you to discuss the approach the new agency is taking to develop its approach to future tourism project support.
Oliver Mundell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, to ask the Cabinet Secretary if he would ask the new South of Scotland Agency to make urgent contact with Gretna Green, which is one of the largest tourism businesses in the south of Scotland that's experiencing an extreme drop-off in tourists from China as a result of the coronavirus.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I hear what he says, and will draw it to the attention of both Professor Griggs and the Interim Chief Executive, Nick Halfhide. It's a perfectly reasonable point. I think in general terms we're all extremely concerned about the coronavirus. It's a devastating blow for China. It's an absolute tragedy. But the concerns are now also what the impact will be in other parts of the world, including our country, quite frankly. So this matter has obviously been dealt with principally by the Chief Medical Officer and the Health Minister, but it's one that we take very seriously, and we will obviously bear that particular issue in mind. But I will ask the SOSC appointed leaders to look at the issue in Gretna Green in particular, since the member has raised it with me.
Question 3, Gordon Lyndhurst.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of how the increase in the number of tourists is impacting on the country's cities.
Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewing.
The Scottish Government recognises that tourism makes an important contribution to the economy of all of our cities. Our cities had the highest levels of tourism employment in 2018, with 36,000 jobs in Edinburgh and 31,000 in Glasgow. We've carried out some assessment in relation to specific issues, such as the impact of short-term lets on Edinburgh and Glasgow. At a local level, we continue to engage with key organisations and authorities to help understand the wider context of the impact of tourism and what the Scottish Government and its agencies can do to support this.
Gordon Lyndhurst.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The CDP, a not-for-profit charity that runs the Global Disclosure System for Environmental Impacts, published its global annual ranking of the best-performing cities last week. Not a single Scottish city appears in the global A-list of 105, although 5 English cities do. Given that the Scottish Parliament has committed to net zero carbon emissions by 2045, how does the Cabinet Secretary explain the absence of cities such as Edinburgh, Glasgow and Aberdeen from the list, and what is being done to address this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm happy to look at the individual report that the member mentions today, and we will do so. I know from my although relatively short tenure as Tourism Minister this time round, but I do know that the tourism leaders and all of those involved in the industry are as keen, if not more so, than everyone else to engage in the low-carbon agenda. And Scotland is a world leader in that regard. I think that's really beyond questioning from the First Minister's lead and the hard work done by Rosanna Cunningham. And I think that will become evident, actually, in November this year, where, of course, Glasgow is hosting the COP and will be a tremendous opportunity to showcase not the negatives, frankly, about which we hear all too much from the people on my left, but from the positives. And one of them will be the contribution that many, many tourism businesses are making.
Question 4, Gil Patterson.
Thanks, thanks very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it can offer to projects such as the Cocknell Stone Heritage Project in Faithfully, Clydebank.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
Support for community heritage projects is provided through Historic Environment Scotland, our lead public body for the historic environment. The Scottish Government provides £14.5 million annually to Historic Environment Scotland for grants to support communities to understand, to celebrate and revitalise our heritage, of which £1.4 million is spent on archaeology projects. Historic Environment Scotland also works in direct partnership with communities through projects like the Scotland's Prehistoric Rock Art Project, which supported members of the community in Faithfully to create detailed records and models of rock art sites in Clydebank.
Gil Patterson.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. And I would like to thank the Cabinet Secretary for the time that she spent last week when she addressed the reception to highlight the Cocknell Stone project, and the time given at that was really well appreciated by all the folk that turned up to this Parliament. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would like to visit the site of the Cocknell Stone at the appropriate time to see at first hand both the very good work that's been carried out there and the opportunities that this site offers the Faithfully and the wider community.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I had a very enjoyable evening last week with the community from Faithfully. Faithfully rocks, most certainly when it comes to, I think, community and engaged archaeology. It was fantastic to see how the archaeologists from the University of Glasgow had engaged the local community. Community council was there, primary schools, all having a fantastic, tremendous sense of place about their community and discovering and understanding Scotland's place historically over many thousands of years and the art. So I'd be delighted to visit the site. The Cocknell Stone is actually covered up just now, but actually I think what's important is that empowerment of local communities that comes from heritage and art projects working with communities. And I hope members across the Chamber will see when we publish the culture strategy shortly that that's going to be a very important part of how we take Scotland and its relationship with culture and heritage forward.
I'll remind members that questions 5, 6 and 8 are grouped together. If you want to come in for the supplementary, come in at the end of the supplementary to question 8. I'm being very helpful. Question 5, Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it is providing to develop the tourism industry in Shetland.
Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewing.
The Scottish Government fully recognises the importance of tourism to Shetland's economy. The numerous attractions of Shetland, from stunning scenery to historical sites such as the Jarlshof, are actively promoted by Visit Scotland through its many marketing campaigns. Recognising the popularity of sites in the Shetland Islands brings challenges to public infrastructure, £133,000 was awarded through the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund for parking facilities in Hoswick to address these issues.
Beatrice Wishart.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. He may be aware that the Sombra Hotel and the Shetland tourism industry have been waiting over 3 years for Historic Environment Scotland to sort out badly needed visitor facilities at the historic Jarlshof site in Shetland. In January 2019, the Scottish Government rejected a business case to build toilets and bus parking, leaving a private business to voluntarily provide these basic facilities to growing numbers of cruise ship visitors. Will the Cabinet Secretary look into the matter with a sense of urgency to ensure that another tourist season does not pass without any progress?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, thank you for the member for raising that, and I'm aware of the great contribution that cruise tourism is now making to the island, something that Fiona Hislop and indeed myself have been promoting for many years and has been developed with great success locally throughout Scotland. I understand in relation to the matter raised by the member that Historic Scotland are currently actively engaged in looking at this, and I'd be happy to consider this further with the member if she so wishes.
Question 6, David Stewart.
Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what it's doing to support tourism in the Highlands.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government, both directly and through its public bodies, provides significant support to the sector within the Highlands. Through the Inverness and Highland City Region deal, we are providing £15 million towards the Highland Council's redevelopment of Inverness Castle into an international visitor attraction that promotes the whole Highlands, which will benefit the wider tourism economy of the area. The Highlands have also benefited, Presiding Officer, from our Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund with 12 projects receiving funding of nearly £2.7 million out of the total of £6 million allocation for the first 2 rounds.
David Stewart.
Presiding Officer, could I welcome the Cabinet Secretary to his new brief in tourism. Mr Young will be well aware of my campaign to find a new home for the iconic Ironworks music venue in Inverness, very popular with tourists and locals alike. Will the Cabinet Secretary support to the hilt the excellent work being carried out by HIE, and will Mr Ewing accompany to a future visit to the Ironworks?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, thank you for the good wishes. The offer is somewhat more unexpected, but one to which due and appropriate consideration will be given. But seriously, but seriously, I think Mr Stewart has been raising this matter for some time. I know that locally it's much appreciated. I support the aims and objectives. I'm pleased that HIE have been paused, and I'm very happy to work with him in my new role to see what progress we can make and how quickly we can make it.
Question 8, Liam MacArthur.
The Scottish Government what discussions it has had with Destination Orkney and Orkney Islands Council regarding the future needs of the tourism sector.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government has had ongoing contact with Orkney Islands Council in relation to support through the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund. Our support for the sector is delivered through a range of public bodies. All are member of the Destination Orkney Partnership, along with the Council, chaired by Destination Orkney, offering strategic direction to tourism development.
Thank you. Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary and like David Stewart, welcome him to his new role. He'll be aware, of course, of the frustration felt the continued failure to deliver RET and cheaper fares on the Pentland Firth route. But the tourism sector is also affected by relatively high cost of air services to and from Orkney. So will he therefore agree to engage with his colleague, the Transport Secretary and Loganair, which is in the process of introducing larger aircraft onto its routes, to discuss ways in which this opportunity can be used to reduce fares?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, again, I thank Mr MacArthur for his kind words, and I think he knows I did actually, and my family enjoyed an excellent holiday in Orkney, slightly wet, but great fun. So that was good, and we travelled by ferry and had a lovely time. I've also travelled frequently by air, and the journey can be somewhat exciting, and the landings muscle clenching. So I do know that this is this is a serious issue, and I will be very happy to raise with my colleague, the Transport Minister, the issue, which is a serious one for all island inhabitants, because the costs of air travel are indeed pretty high.
Edward Mountain, followed by Gail Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Cabinet Secretary, your enthusiasm for tourism does you credit, and it's critical to the Highlands. Can you tell me when the funicular railway will be operational? Is it 2024, 2025, or 2026, or later?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I can assure the member and all members across all parties that HIE is working extremely hard to develop a master plan to scheme out a sustainable future economically and environmentally for the funicular railway in Cairngorm. They're doing a power of work here. They're also currently consulting with local communities. I understand that in the last few days, skiing has been taking place in Cairngorm, which is hugely welcome after a lean season, and that's to be welcomed. Mr Mountain knows that there are complex engineering matters and solutions which must be worked through properly, and that the costings to remedy the work that needs to be done to put matters right have to be very carefully assembled. I can assure him, however, that that work is underway. I've undertaken previously to report to Parliament periodically. And finally, just to say this, I give my absolute commitment that the Scottish Government is determined to find a solution, because we are well aware of the huge importance of the funicular railway for all year-round visitors to this part of Scotland, and we are working across portfolios extremely hard to deliver a long-term, successful, viable solution, so that once again we see Cairngorm providing excellent opportunities both winter and summer.
I have Gail Ross. I've got Richard Lyle. Mr Lyle, I have to caution you, these are questions in the Highlands and Islands, so you may... Well, you're on notice. If I don't hear Highlands and Islands in that first breath that you take, you're stopping in your tracks. Gail Ross, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what the Scottish Government's proposed solutions are to protect our tourism and hospitality industry in the Highlands and Islands from the UK Government's attack on immigration?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I have to say, Presiding Officer, that the response in Scotland from representatives of all businesses to the UK's appalling proposals on immigration and migration has never been clearer and stronger, has never been more united, and has never been more compelling. Whether it's the tourism sector, the agriculture or fishing sector, or the care sector, all of the representatives, entirely independent of politics, are saying exactly the same thing. These proposals will not work. But moreover, these proposals put at risk, a phrase used by most of the representatives, at risk the very future of these sectors. We are in an extremely serious situation, and therefore I'm not straying into politics, but the current situation will not hold. The UK Government must start listening to the voice of Scotland and its representatives across the whole spectrum of society.
And Richard Lyle.
Cabinet Secretary, I agree with you. It is very important that we continue to attract people to work in the tourist sector, particularly in the Highlands and Islands. What impact does the Cabinet Secretary think the UK Government's new immigration plans will have on Scotland's tourism industry and the Highlands and Islands?
The work of a pro, Mr Lyle. Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as the Chamber knows, Mr Lyle is a great friend of the Highlands and Islands, and a friend of mine as well. But you know, to be serious, I would say this in addition to the previous answer I gave. The working population of the Highlands and Islands is due to shrink massively before 2040. We have an urgent requirement not to see fewer people, but to bring in more people and to retain the existing people. And this is one of the greatest challenges that we face, and it will require a whole suite of policies. But the very last thing it needs is the negative, narrow-minded, insular, parochial, and arrogant and dismissive approach of the Home Secretary to these matters. And it cannot hold. And I suspect we will see that there will be change to the absurd proposals, the likes of which I cannot remember having seen in my 20 years here.
Thank you. Question 7 has been withdrawn, so we're going to move straight on to the next set of portfolio questions on education and skills. Question 1, John Mason, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the importance of young people leaving school going into positive destinations.
Minister Jamie Hepburn.
The Scottish Government places the utmost importance on our young people securing a positive next step in learning, life and work following their school education, which increases their chances of continuing on a positive path. In that regard, I welcome the figures published this week, which show the highest ever level of positive post-school initial destinations for school leavers in 2018-19 at 95%.
John Mason.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Does the Minister think that perhaps we as a society sometimes put too much emphasis on inputs, such as the number of subjects studied, rather than outcomes and outputs, such as whether young people are going into successful training and careers?
Minister.
Well, yeah, I would agree with the perspective that we should take a broader look. I do recognise that the range of subject matters that young person studies is part of that equation. But yes, we should look at the outcomes, and if we look at attainment between 2006 and 7 to 2018-19, the number of young people with one or more qualification at SEQF level 4 or higher has gone up 2.5 percentage points. The number with one or more qualification at SEQF level 5 or higher is up 14 percentage points, and the number of young people with one or more qualification at SEQF level 6 or higher has gone up 18.9 percentage points. The latest figures show the gap in achieving a positive destination between the most and least deprived communities is less than 6 percentage points for the first time, and the unemployment rate for young people over the decade from 2008-2009 fell from 16.4% to 9.1%, the lowest in the UK. So I certainly agree with Mr Mason, we should be looking at the outcomes.
Jamie Halker-Johnson, followed by Daniel Johnson.
The Minister will be aware that not all positive destinations would be deemed equal and that virtually anything other than an unknown outcome or claiming unemployment benefits is considered positive by the Scottish Government's definition. What yesterday's figures do show is that attainment across multiple levels of qualification has declined, limiting the opportunities of young people to fulfil their potential. So will the Minister give a commitment to ensure that future data gives more detail, ensuring that we can get a clearer, more accurate picture of the ongoing employment outcomes, educational journeys and destinations of our young people?
Minister.
Well, of course, we'll take any suggestion made in good faith, and I trust Mr Halker-Johnson was making that in good faith. We'll take that away and consider it. But I would observe that the figures we publish show a direction of travel over a period of time. You can compare from 1 year to the next, and I would remind Mr Halker-Johnson the point I've just made. We have record levels of young people entering to positive destinations after school in 2018-19 at 95%. I think everyone should welcome that. Daniel Johnson.
The Minister will know that achieving a positive destination is that much harder if school leavers have additional support needs. Only around 16% of autistic adults are in employment. But just today, the SCSC have highlighted the attainment gap for children with additional support needs is growing in our schools. So does the Minister agree with me that we need to restore the specialist support staff that have been left from our schools, and much more work needs to be done in helping children with additional support needs so they too can achieve positive destinations?
Minister.
Yes, of course, we need to continue to do all we can to support young people within the school environment that have additional support needs. That's something the Government is committed to doing. We will always look to see what more we can continue to do. It isn't, of course, just within the school environment that we have to be committed to do that. This is about post-school destinations across a range of measurements in the employability and training system, which I have responsibility for. We're seeking to undertake that type of intervention to secure better outcomes for young people with additional support learning needs.
Question 2, Sandra White.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what impact Brexit will have on higher education institutions across Scotland that are in receipt of European research funding.
Minister Richard Lochhead.
Scottish organisations can continue to participate fully in Horizon 2020 until the programme closes and projects have been completed. So the impact during this transition period is limited regarding the current Horizon programme. Scotland's future participation in the next programme, Horizon Europe, would of course ensure the continuation of the significant benefits and opportunities, and there is no good alternative to being part of the world's biggest research and innovation programme. So that is why the Scottish Government has been pressing the UK Government to enable full participation of Scottish organisations in Horizon Europe.
Sandra White.
I thank the Minister for that reply and that response. I have already raised the issue in the Chamber before in regards to Erasmus affecting students, but I think we do definitely need clarity in regards to European funding and Erasmus, not just for the institutions themselves, but also for students in the future. So can the Cabinet Secretary, Minister, tell me exactly what safeguards we can put in place, apart from just speaking to the Westminster Government?
Minister.
Well, clearly, if the UK decides to go for a reduced form of participation in Horizon Europe, indeed if any association takes place with Horizon Europe, then we would look for it to ensure that current overall funding levels are at least maintained in Scotland to avoid any shortfall in income for Scotland's excellent higher education institutions. At the moment, we're told the UK Government are still considering, for instance, value for money analysis of Horizon. And we, as you can imagine, are inputting that this is very good value for money, given that Scotland has benefited to the tune of €687 million. That's 11% of the UK's funding pot, which illustrates the strength of our science and innovation in our universities and other organisations. So clearly, it will depend upon to what extent there is association with Horizon Europe from the UK Government as to how the Scottish Government responds to that. If a domestic alternative is then looked at by the UK Government, then clearly we'd have to respond to that as well and look at how Scotland can maximise its participation in Horizon Europe or find some other means of securing the funding from the UK Government.
Question 3, Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether its work to improve financial support for students who are estranged from parents or guardians will also cover students who are estranged from one parent rather than both.
Minister Richard Lockhead.
The Scottish Government currently defines an estranged student as a student who has no contact with their parents. This means that there is a permanent breakdown in the relationship between the student and their parents, with no sign of this being resolved in the future. We are, however, committed to undertaking independent research to understand the numbers of estranged students in Scotland, the issues they face and the support they need. And our intention is to ensure this exercise is as inclusive as possible in terms of the variations of estrangement.
Bill Kidd.
I thank the Minister for that response. I'm glad to hear of the work being done in collaboration with Stand Alone to engage with the issues facing estranged students. Currently, as I understand it, children raised by a single parent will still be means tested on the basis of income of both parents and are given guidance to this effect by SAS. In practice, however, students will often receive no financial support from the non-present parent. Will the Scottish Government research into how this requirement affects this category of students, both in terms of finance and stress?
Minister.
Clearly, if the member has any examples of students affected in that way, I'd be keen to hear about those particular case studies, and I would be keen to ensure that the research we've spoken about, and I've just recently announced, takes into account the circumstances outlined by the member. However, I would want to add that the amount of bursary and student loan that a student can access from SAS is based on the household income of their permanent home. And therefore, only the income of the single parent would be taken into account in that kind of circumstance. And that is perhaps not what's reflected in the member's point. So I can assure him that the advice I have from the Student Awards Agency is that only the income of the single parent will be taken into account when looking at the overall household income for any student. So I'll certainly write to the member with any further clarity that's required on that issue. But as I said, this is an issue we're very keen to look at, and that's why we have commissioning this independent research so we can be better informed about the right decisions to take.
Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I commend Bill Kidd for raising this important issue? It's one that touches many families in Scotland. Can I just ask, though, that I appreciate you're doing some work to analyse the scale of the situation, but how will the Minister ensure that any additional funding that is made available will give sufficient support to pupils who do have a single parent, given the lack of relative income that other students with two parents will be given, and what additional measures of support the government will give to those pupils to ensure they have the same opportunity and chances as those with two-parent families?
Minister.
Well, clearly it goes to the heart of this debate that charities like Stand Alone, who've effectively made the case on behalf of estranged students, have outlined the barriers that estranged students face in terms of barriers not faced by other students. So clearly the Scottish Government wants to knock down as many barriers as possible. In terms of different circumstances outlined by the member, I should make it clear there's already arrangements in place for different types of situation at the moment. What we're specifically talking about here, of course, is estranged students, and I've already outlined the criteria by which the Student Awards Agency look at when assessing estranged students. There are some special arrangements in place at the moment to support estranged students, to ensure, for instance, they're not subject to the mean testing element of the other kinds of support that are available for independent students, for instance. So there is some account taken of estranged students, but clearly the purpose of the research is to understand all the issues facing estranged students, make sure that any future decisions we take are informed by that research.
Question 4, Ross Greer.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to ensure that all school staff have access to mental health first aid training.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the mental health and wellbeing of children and young people is a priority for the Scottish Government. To ensure all school staff have access to quality and effective resources and training, we have convened a mental health in schools working group. The group will develop a new mental health and wellbeing professional learning resource for primary, secondary and special school staff, which will provide essential learning required to support children and young people's mental health and wellbeing. This training will be made available in addition to the current Scottish Mental Health First Aid Training Programme.
Ross Greer.
Thank you. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Scottish Government's commitment to providing mental health first aid training is commendable, but the funding for it was first provided 6 years ago. Some time has passed, and it was targeted at schools most in need, which did mean a huge majority of school staff were not able to access it. When I requested information from the government on how many staff have received the training, they stated that they did not hold that information and did not intend to include it in their forthcoming evaluation. Without knowing how many staff have even received mental health first aid training, does the government really believe that it is going to meet the needs of our young people's mental health in schools?
Cabinet Secretary.
There are, of course, a variety of different interventions that are taken to support the mental health and well-being of young people in schools, and Mr Greer will be aware of the fact that we are obviously taking forward with our local authority partners the commitment to put in place a mental health counsellor in every single secondary school in the country. This morning I was at Wester Hills Education Centre, and before I left I had the pleasure to meet with the Place to Be organisation, who are funded to provide mental health support to young people at Wester Hills Education Centre. It was a really well-focused service supporting the needs of young people, and of course there will be a range of interventions of this type in different parts of the country. Now, of course, there is always a dilemma about how much data we gather, how much information we request of individual schools, because it has to come from individual schools, so I'm mindful of the workload challenges that puts on individual schools. But I am confident that we have the range of measures in place that will provide the effective support that individuals are entitled to expect, and which would be of advantage and benefit to young people in Scotland's schools.
And I want to get the rest of people in, so can you be brief, please? I take Mary Fee, followed by Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A survey by NAS UWT Scotland found that nearly 2/3 of teachers feel their job has adversely affected their mental health in the last 12 months. Could the Cabinet Secretary tell the Chamber how the Scottish Government expects teachers to go further in supporting the mental health of pupils when they are already facing increasing pressure and stress on their own mental health?
Cabinet Secretary.
Clearly, local authorities have a duty of care to ensure that all staff, in whatever capacity, are well supported in the work that they undertake, and we'd expect local authorities to fulfil that obligation.
Beatrice Wishart.
While committing to increasing mental health first aid training in schools, the Government has said that it will increase the number of counsellors available by September 2020. Does the Cabinet Secretary recognise that there are difficulties in assessing this target because of insufficient information about the number of counselling posts that are currently funded by education authorities? And will the Cabinet Secretary consider requesting a breakdown of pupil equity funding spend from local authorities to assist with this scrutiny and to make sure this important expansion is successful?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, again, I come back to the question of how much data do we collect on some of these questions, because I'm conscious that if I was to do exactly what Beatrice Wishart has asked me to do, I would be adding to the workload burden on individual schools, and I'm constantly pressed in this Parliament to minimise the workload burden that I place on individual schools. So I don't doubt the significance of the issue. I recognise its significance. We have agreed with local authorities how we'll take forward the distribution of resources to support the expansion of the counselling service. I look forward to that taking place, and I'm sure it will be of benefit to young people in Scotland's schools.
Thank you. Question 6 has been withdrawn. I exempt that, but questions 5 and 7 have not been lodged, and that is not good practice because it excludes other members from the ballot. So I think those parties should take heed. Question 8, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the number of teachers in post.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, statistics published on the 10th of December 2019 show that teacher numbers increased for the 4th year in a row, rising to 52,247 in 2019. There are now more teachers than at any time since 2009, and the ratio of pupils to teachers is at its lowest since 2013. Primary teacher numbers are at their highest since 1980.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. While there has been a small increase in teacher numbers compared to last year, the pupil-teacher ratio remains unchanged. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what he's doing to address the fact that the number of probationers who achieve a full-time teaching post has fallen by 7%, which is the first fall since 2013?
Cabinet Secretary.
Obviously, this is one of the fraught issues in the whole issue of workforce planning, because we have to make estimates of the number of candidates that it is responsible to bring into the education profession to provide suitable opportunities for individuals to seek employment, but also for there to be appropriate choice for public authorities in selecting those individuals. Now, it will never be an exact science, and what we are trying to do is to ensure that we have a sufficient flow of teachers joining the teaching profession. I am very pleased that the number of teachers is at its highest level since 2009. That's a very strong platform for us to deliver education for young people in Scotland, and we continue to keep the intake into initial teacher education under review, and will take decisions according to the presence of teachers within the teaching workforce.
Two supplementaries. I must ask them to brief. Ian Gray, followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary knows that many, if not most, of those recent new teaching posts are fixed-term contracts because they're funded by the Pupil Equity Fund. Does he agree that brings an undesirable uncertainty into the profession, and what will he do to address it?
Cabinet Secretary.
I do accept that that brings an undesirable and an unnecessary uncertainty, because pupil equity funding has been provided to schools on a sustained basis, Scottish Attainment Challenge resources for a longer period, and indeed the timescale for pupil equity funding and Scottish Attainment Challenge has been extended by a further year. So I would have thought it was reasonable for local authorities to provide full-time contracts for the individuals affected, because in the natural turnover of teaching staff within our education system, there should be adequate turnover to enable us to accommodate any strain that may come from that issue. Now, these are matters for local authorities to take forward. Parliament clearly advises me to restrain the amount of direction I issue to local authorities, but I would gently encourage local authorities to deliver full-time contracts in these circumstances.
Kenneth Gibson, very briefly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. At local authority level, opposition members often demand autonomy to decide how many teachers to provide. Yet if the Scottish Government provides additional funding and opposition councils cut teacher numbers, Tory MSPs like Alexander Stewart are among the first to blame this on the Government. Does the Cabinet Secretary share my view that the opposition cannot have it both ways?
Cabinet Secretary.
As on many things, Mr Gibson makes a very fair point. And what's important is that the Government is providing resources to local authorities that have enabled us to get to a point where we have the highest number of teachers in our schools in a decade. And that's a really welcome and strong position. I'm glad to have had such enthusiastic support from Mr Gibson in taking forward that policy position. And I look forward to that having a positive effect on education around the country.
Thank you. That concludes questions. There'll be a short pause to allow members to take the places in the front bench.